Now, what we're going to cover tonight is a little survey of Carl Jung, and we're doing this because, in part, there were the, as we do this class, more and more materials show up, and in particular for Jung, there's a whole series of new YouTube videos that simply weren't there, a year ago, that are really interesting, I think, expositions of what Jung had to say. So we're going to go through those in a moment. And then this is our next to last class, our last class, which is a week from today. We're going to survey, where we've been over the last 5 years. So we've been doing this for 5 years, and we started off with something. Bruce has been with us through the whole thing. And we do have 160 plus subscribers to our YouTube channel. So there's other people out there that are looking at these things that aren't simply attending class, but it is what it is. So we'll try and provide some perspective on, we started at a certain point and covered certain things, and here we are now 5 years later. What's changed? What's different? And try and give you some perspective. Then we're going to take the summer off, and we'll start up again early October. So that's it. So here we go. The first thing I'm going to try and do is I'm going to do a share screen here. Okay, can everybody see this? Elise?
Yep.
Okay. So here we have a picture of Carl Jung, and we have this is our logo for Aleph Talks. Aleph is here. It's the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet. In mathematics, it's used as a symbol for infinity. There's different orders of infinity. So Aleph is here, and it encompasses from alpha to omega, which is shown by this proverbial dragon that starts off at the start and goes around to the tail, and it's eating its tail here. So that's our logo. So here we go. We're going to take some material from Wikipedia just to set the stage, and then go into these YouTube videos. So the first thing to look at is all these books that Jung wrote. He was born in 1875. He died in 1961. Incredibly prolific, and yet this book here, the Red Book, he actually wrote this between 1913 and 1930, and it was never published until 2009. His estate didn't allow it to be published. We actually have a big copy of it, and a small. The big one is big, and he wrote this all in he's Swiss, so he wrote it in the German script Fraktur, which is what the Nazis used to think about the old days in Germany. Fraktur is this funny looking way you do the Roman alphabet, and
it's like calligraphy.
And there's all kinds of pictures that Jung drew in here. He's an incredible artist, and the pictures themselves are amazing. He did this basically to try and I'll just kind of say he wanted to see what it was like to go crazy. So he wrote this book, and yet he would do this every day for years, but his he had a regular practice with patients for psychotherapy, and the patients would go through this. So so it goes. So
well, and he was affiliated with a hospital,
right,
where he was a psychiatrist, not a psychologist.
Right.
But so there were medical standards that he had to measure up to in his work there with patients, and it was all very regulated, and he had to conform to all these requirements. So he was functioning, as a high-level professional while he was having this. It was an extended experience that some people have dismissed as a psychosis. But when you look at the book, it's too well organized to
Yeah,
be a
it's
psychosis. There might be some content of it that's similar, that he would say was coming through the collective unconscious, through his
or it's his midlife crisis,
right.
however you want to frame it,
But it was extremely coherent, which a breakdown is not.
right.
And for example, he treated James Joyce's daughter, who was very similar to James Joyce in a lot of her ideas. And actually, he got a lot of ideas from her, but she wasn't coherent. She wasn't writing books with it. It was overwhelming her personality. But James Joyce would say to Jung, but what's the difference? She has such similar ideas to mine. And Jung said to Joyce, the difference is you were diving in the content and she's drowning in it. So, or another metaphor is a glass bottom boat. But if you look at the red book, we should show some of the imagery.
Yeah.
He's clearly in a trance. You can tell because that writing and that kind of calligraphy script is so consistent. It would be really hard to be that consistent in just your ordinary consciousness. But it's not incoherent. It's not out of control. It's not just random scribblings. It's highly organized. But his family didn't want it exposed until
50 years after his death,
right. They weren't willing to share that with the world.
So this is just a sample. Here's another set of books that Jung wrote. He has a collective works. And so you see these things with a similar stuff here. These are excerpts of his collected works here, that themselves are monographs. So no shortage of ideas here that he came up with. So uh, we all try and say Jung was born in the 19th century, 1875. He lived in the 20th century till 1961, but really this century, the 21st century, is when his ideas are going to come into play, and people will recognize broadly what he had to say. Not that he's ignored today. So here we go. This is just a little prologue. He was a psychiatrist, a psychotherapist, and a psychologist. He was also uh, an astrologer. He made astrological charts of all of his patients, which he taught himself.
But
Yeah.
he didn't really discuss them with the patient, so that's not an astrologer. But
He used it as an aid in his diagnosis of what was going on. But the thing that he's popularly most known for is the concept of archetypes, which was popularized by Joseph Campbell in all of these the public television shows with Bill Moyers in the U.S. And he was a contemporary of Freud. Freud viewed him to be his successor, and he had a break with Freud, saying that there was more to this than just dreams. And that's what I want to go explore. Another very famous person out of the Vienna School was Adler, and also Viktor Frankl is another one. So for whatever reason, the Austrians crank out some truly amazing people. But Jung, is probably the one that's head and shoulders above all the rest of them, in my opinion. So his work has influenced psychiatry, anthropology, archaeology, literature, philosophy, psychology, and religion. That I think says it all. And he worked as a research scientist in Zurich at this Burkhalter psychiatric hospital. And he was so outstanding that he got recruited by Freud to come join him in Vienna. They had a huge correspondence and everything. And today, Jung is recognized as one of the most influential psychiatrists slash psychologists in history. But I don't even think we've begun to explore the ideas that he had. Freud saw the younger Jung not only as the heir he'd been seeking to take forward his new science of psychoanalysis, but as a means to legitimize his own work. And Freud and other contemporary psychoanalysts were Jews, and there was rising anti-Semitism in Europe, and this is before World War I. This is not, and Jung was Christian, so this legitimized, went a long way toward helping. So Freud secured Jung's appointment as the president of this International Psychoanalytical Association that Freud had just created. So he came in as the president, which shows you how Freud views him. And Jung's research and his own ideas made it difficult for him to follow Jung's doctrine, and they parted ways. Very painful for Jung, and it resulted in the establishment of Jung's analytical psychology as a comprehensive system separate from psychoanalysis.
The main difference was that Freud saw everything as neuroses of subconscious material that was being suppressed by the conscious ego, whereas Jung saw it as incredibly fertile, universal material, we could say, that was, miraculous and divine, and from a divine source and the collective unconscious, whereas Freud saw everything as the personal unconscious or subconscious, and it was all suppressed sexual fantasies and things, and it was so reductive. Whereas I think Jung amplified things. He opened it up. He explored it, and he dove deeply into the mystery of it, which is a lot more than just suppressed sexual fantasies. And I feel Freud did a real disservice to women when he dismissed a lot of their reports of their childhood experience, which the medical field was actually verifying as sexual abuse. He said it was all fantasies, and so wishful thinking. But there was medical evidence of the physical harm that was done to these young girls that was suppressed. And this all came out in a book by, I think it was Henri Masson, a French name, Masson. It came out, I think, in the 80s. And that's a terrible crime. That was a crime against his patients and women. And to reduce their violation to their wishful thinking that they wanted it, they wanted these men doing these things to them. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And that it didn't happen, and it was just, their aimless desire is just idiotic and horrible, I think. So I had a major disillusionment with Freud, who I had really liked in college. I liked his interpretation of dreams. I was fascinated by it. But then when I read about this rupture with Jung, who was his heir apparent, but when Jung said, well, I don't think we should reduce everything that the unconscious is producing to these, wishful thinking sexual fantasies that these girls are having because they really desire their fathers. No, you can't just do that. History should not allow it, and the field should not allow it. And Jung was rebelling against Freud's paternalism. He really viewed Jung as his, son. And he was fighting against that. And it was very difficult for Jung psychologically. Well, that's part of what was going on during the period of the Red Book, was his rupture with Freud, who was a father figure for him.
Right.
So
Yeah.
and he didn't have the benefit. Neither one of them had the benefit of their own analysis to really get to the root of their own complexes.
So it's just to continue here, the a central concept in analytical psychology is individuation, which is the lifelong psychological process, a differentiation of the self out of each individual's conscious and unconscious elements. And Jung considered it to be the main task of human development. I would say he practiced this. You could see he evolved over time in his thinkings and what happened. For example, when the Nag Hammadi uh, site was discovered with all of these
Dead Sea Scrolls.
Dead Sea Scrolls, Jung was all over it. Like, what's going on here? And he said, no, this is a great opportunity to really understand what happened back then. Or he retained this German who translated from Chinese into German the Golden Flower, which many people view as one of the greatest works of literature. He did this in like 1930. Okay, I mean, Jung is just all over the place in terms of what he was doing.
He was also part of translating the I Ching.
Right.
And wrote a wonderful introduction to the translation that became the most famous. But it was a conscious tool of synchronicity, which was something that he was really intrigued by for most of his life. But that they would either throw these straws or these coins to get, a random combination that you would then look up in this book that came out of, very early Chinese thinking and nature studies, really. It was so foreign to anything going on in the West. It was really incredible.
Yeah, they
that
viewed
he
him as a
was-
nutcase.
Right.
What are you talking about, throwing these sticks down and making decisions based on where the sticks land? Are you crazy?
But he had the depth to take it seriously, and study it humbly. He had the humility and the depth to explore it as something outside his ken. And the man who translated it, Wilhelm, was eternally grateful to Jung for giving it some legitimacy. So
Yeah.
that's why he asked him to write the foreword to the first translation that made it to the West through Germany.
Right.
So, but Jung was, honored to do it and took it extremely seriously. When I do tarot, I do all kinds of things. I do astrology. When I want my deepest, most truthful insight, I turn to the I Ching. It's has an incredible depth and a whole way of thinking that's very foreign to our way of thinking in the West.
Yep. So Jung created some of the best known psychological concepts, including synchronicity, which he got involved with Wolfgang Pauli, who was on the faculty there in Zurich at the ETH, and Jung was right around the corner in Zurich. And Pauli approached him around 1930 and said, I'm seeing stuff in physics that I'm starting to go crazy. Pauli got into heavy drinking and womanizing like crazy because he was looking for some escape mechanism because he couldn't explain the experiments that physicists were doing, and in particular, the so-called double slit experiment, where you had one slit and you shot electrons through the slit and they all lined up on the other side, no problem. And then you had two slits close together and you shot electrons at the two slits, and you think you'd get just two lines of electrons hitting on the other side. Instead, what you got was a wave interference pattern that the electron turned into a wave, not a particle, and it ended up creating an interference pattern that you would get it if that's what you had were waves to start with. And Ron Cowan, in fact, observed this and could see that the electron was actually recognizing whether there's one or two slits there. And so it goes,
Changing
which is
behavior.
something that Pauli didn't know. But the experiment, just drives physicists crazy. That's why Ron Cowan made these observations. And the Pauli had another little quirk to him, which was he was a great theoretician, and so many experimental physicists would create experiments to test some of his ideas, and they would invite him to his lab to come see the experiment. When Pauli walked in the lab, typically the experiment would crash, it would fall apart just spontaneously, just from him walking in. And so it was called the Pauli phenomenon. And the most well-known example of this was Pauli was in Zurich, and this other guy was in Göttingen in Germany, this physicist, and he was running this experiment, and the whole thing collapsed, just like Pauli was right there in the room. And he said, "Well, I know Pauli's in Zurich, so I don't know what's going on." And a few days later, he got a postcard from Pauli saying, "I was taking the train from Zurich to Copenhagen, and I actually went to Göttingen exactly when your experiment, the guy looked at the train schedule, and when Pauli was on the train, that was close enough for him to destroy the experiment that this guy had run." So you can go ask yourself, what in the world is going on here with this? The notion of archetypes, Jung pursued very diligently, the collective unconscious, the psychological complex, and the concepts of extroversion and introversion. And one of the byproducts of this was he treated an American businessman, Roland Hazard, in 1926, that with this conviction that alcoholics can recover if they have a vital spiritual or religious experience that played a crucial role in the chain of events that this led to the formation of Alcoholics Anonymous. Jung helped to create that, and a key principle is that you have to believe in a higher entity. If you don't do that, you're not going to get cured.
Which they call higher power in the programs rather
Right.
than calling it God, because that offends so many people.
Yeah. And so Jung was an artist, as you'd see if we looked in the Red Book at these pictures. He was a craftsman, and in the sense that if you look at the Red Book again, it's just a work of art. How he put this thing together. There's probably 60, 70 beautiful pictures in it that he painted in color. These are, and in fact, let's just interrupt this for a second, and let's
beautiful mandalas.
we're just going to go on the web and look for.
I think we have some on our page.
Yeah, I think we do, but I'm just going to go look here to see.
But he also even built furniture.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
share, do a screen share of this.
Yeah, here we go. This is just an example of some of the mandalas that Jung created. Here's this one over here, this one. I'm looking to see the one out of the red book. I don't see it. Oh, this is it here. Here's one.
Yeah, we use that in
Yeah.
our materials a lot.
Yeah. So you can see this, he's clearly into order, but you know, who else do you know that does things like this? So anyway, let's get
I
out of
think
this.
somebody else that might have been a breakdown, but he was able to organize the experience and function through it. So it was more of a breakthrough for him, through some kind of a membrane.
Right.
And he used to say that it was very important to have a membrane there. And really what you want is like a glass bottom boat. So you're not taken over by the material from the collective unconscious, because it can overwhelm you, or a lot of people over identify with it, and a lot of megalomaniac personalities, which I think we're seeing at this point in the United States, are overtaken by an archetypal idea. I think that happened to Hitler, and it's like being possessed. And they call it being, possessed by an archetype. And somehow that didn't happen to him. He didn't become that inflated. That's what Jung would call it, inflation by an archetype, which is, very, very common. There are people who can't talk to you for 5 minutes without being the teacher, because they're so identified with that archetype. They can't have a conversation. And so he was, I think, very aware of that and always trying to avoid it in his own case.
I just collected here some of these interviews these are all YouTubes. If you actually got this thing and clicked on them, there's a link that would take you to the YouTube interview. So, for example, do you believe in God? This was a CBS interview in the toward the end of his life, and the interviewer asked, "Do you believe in God?" And Jung smiled and says, "No, I know God." And the guy said, "What did you say?" And he said, "Yeah, no, I know what's going on. I know God." So anyway, that's all we're going to cover here. So I'm going to get out of this, and now I'm going to go over back to, we have a whole series of videos here, so I'll just kind of pedal through these things. And if you like them, great. If you don't, we'll just skip over them and do something else.
That's what's changed the most in the past 5 years of doing this class, is that there's so much new material available.
It's not just YouTube and TikTok, and so there's books now that just weren't there 5 years ago, that are incredible. So um, here we go with this. So this is, love is not something. Let me see what this says. You do, it's something. Okay. So I don't know, go figure. We'll see. This is Jung's view on love. Something you are, something you
Listen to
are.
this. You can read every book, watch all the videos, and repeat to yourself 1,000 times that you love yourself. But if you don't understand this one thing, the love you seek will always remain out of reach. Today, I'm not here to give you theory. I'm here to give you the key, something no one has ever told you before, a truth that Carl Jung discovered and that will ever change the way you relate to yourself and others? Are you ready to uncover it? If you're watching this, it's because something inside you already knows there's more. This isn't just about accepting your shadow or balancing your energies. It's about taking those concepts and applying them in a way that transforms your life. And by the end of this video, you won't just have a deeper understanding of why you've struggled to feel loved.
Hey guys,
All
this
right,
is U.S.
I
Senator
get
John
these.
Ossoff in
We have to
Georgia.
get the,
And before you skip this
We
ad,
have to spend some
just
money
hear
to
me
get
out.
rid of the ads.
You'll walk away with a clear and practical strategy to revolutionize your relationship with yourself and, as a result, with others. This isn't about theory, it's about action. Your relationships are not random. What attracts you or repels you in others is a direct reflection of what remains unresolved within you. Think about the last person who made you feel something intense, whether it was love or frustration. That person is more than just a passing figure in your life. They are a mirror, revealing something deeply buried within you. Perhaps you find yourself drawn to people who make you feel insecure, or maybe you constantly feel frustrated by those who exhibit traits that you reject in yourself. Today, you're going to learn how to use that mirror to uncover the parts of yourself that are crying out for attention and healing. Because until you do, you will continue searching for love in all the wrong places. The real question isn't, why does this person behave this way? The real question is, what is this person showing me about myself? This concept, the relational mirror, is far deeper than it appears at first glance. When someone triggers a strong emotional reaction in you, you're experiencing a projection of your own shadow. Look at the patterns in your relationships. Do you find yourself repeatedly drawn to people with similar characteristics? Or do you find yourself constantly avoiding certain types of people? Both reactions are equally revealing. Attraction and repulsion are two sides of the same coin. They both indicate something crucial about your inner world. When you feel deeply drawn to someone, ask yourself, what qualities do I admire in this person? Could it be that these are qualities I haven't fully developed or expressed in myself? Perhaps you admire someone's freedom and spontaneity because you have lived a life that feels too structured and controlled. Similarly, when someone irritates you intensely, ask yourself, what exactly bothers me about this person? Could it be that I possess that same trait, but have denied or repressed it in myself? Maybe arrogance in others triggers you because deep down, you struggle with your own superiority complex, one that you are ashamed to acknowledge. This kind of self-awareness is transformative, but it requires brutal honesty. You must be willing to see the parts of yourself that you've kept hidden, even from yourself. And it's in this recognition that true healing begins. The most difficult relationships in your life are often your greatest teachers. That person who constantly irritates you. They might just be the key to unlocking parts of yourself that need attention. It's no coincidence that certain people appear in your life. They are karmic messengers, showing you the way to your own integration. Remember, just as others reflect parts of you, you also act as a mirror for them. When you understand this, you develop both compassion and responsibility in your interactions. You begin to see that when someone reacts negatively toward you, they aren't necessarily responding to you. They are responding to the reflection of themselves that they see in you. Instead of reacting defensively, you can respond with understanding. The purpose of this work isn't just to identify patterns, it's to transform them. Once you recognize what part of yourself is being reflected in a difficult relationship, you can begin to heal that part. And as you consciously integrate those rejected or underdeveloped aspects of yourself, your relationships will start to change, naturally and effortlessly. This process of integration doesn't happen overnight. Don't expect immediate results. Observe your emotional reactions as if you were a scientist studying a fascinating subject, without judgment, only with genuine curiosity. Over time, you'll notice that the people who once triggered intense reactions in you will no longer have the same power over your emotions. The healthier and more balanced relationships you seek will begin to appear. Instead of attracting people who reflect your wounds, you'll start attracting those who reflect the healed, whole version of yourself. You'll no longer seek in others what you lack within yourself. Instead, you'll create connections based on shared wholeness rather than emotional dependency. True love is only possible after this journey of self-discovery. When you love from a place of wholeness rather than lack, your relationships become spaces for mutual growth rather than sources of emotional neediness. You no longer need someone else to fill your emptiness. You are complete within yourself. And here's the ultimate truth. The part of yourself that you reject is the same part that is sabotaging your relationships. You cannot fully love if you do not accept all of who you are. Think about the things you don't like about yourself, the things you try to hide. That is your shadow. And until you integrate it, you will continue projecting your insecurities onto others. For example, if arrogance in others bothers you, it's likely that a part of you fears being perceived as arrogant. Or if you're drawn to people who make you feel small, it's because deep down, a part of you doesn't feel big enough. Here, you will discover how to integrate your shadow, not to become perfect, but to become whole. Because only when you accept everything that you are, can you love and be loved authentically. Your shadow isn't just the negative aspects of yourself. It also includes your unrecognized gifts and talents. When you reject parts of yourself, you fragment your being, creating an invisible barrier that prevents the deep connection you long for. But when you embrace all that you are, you stop seeking love as something external. You become love. And from that place, true connection becomes inevitable. This fragmentation leads us to seek in others what we cannot accept in ourselves. Every time you harshly judge someone, you are facing a mirror. That quality that irritates you so much in another person is merely a reflection of something within you that remains unacknowledged. Pay close attention to your most intense reactions. Within them, you will find the most valuable clues about yourself.
Many of the world's richest entrepreneurs are quitting alcohol and they're spending their money on luxury cars.
Perhaps you despise vulnerability in others because you fear your own fragility. Or maybe you criticize excessive ambition because you have not allowed yourself to recognize your own desires for success and recognition. Your shadow also manifests in your romantic attractions. We are drawn to people who freely express what we have repressed. If you feel irresistibly attracted to dominant personalities, ask yourself, is there a part of me that longs to express more power and authority? If you constantly seek partners who need to be rescued, you may be projecting your own need for care and attention. Relationship sabotage occurs subtly but persistently. Perhaps you fear abandonment, so you push people away before they have the chance to leave you. Or maybe you fear being controlled, so you resist any suggestion from your partner, even when it is reasonable. These patterns are not random. They are defense mechanisms of your unintegrated shadow. Integrating your shadow requires courage. The first step is to be willing to see it without self-judgment. Whenever you feel an intense aversion to something in another person, ask yourself, where does this exist within me? Not to blame yourself, but to know yourself more deeply. Integration also involves expressing repressed aspects of yourself in safe environments. If you have suppressed your creativity, find spaces where you can freely express it. If you have denied your need for connection, allow yourself to be vulnerable with trusted people. Over time, these rejected parts will transform from hidden saboteurs into sources of strength. A powerful exercise is to write a letter to your shadow. Acknowledge its existence, express gratitude for its attempts to protect you, and share your intention to integrate it with compassion. This internal dialogue can be the beginning of a profound reconciliation with yourself. The beautiful paradox is that by accepting your darkest aspects, you become more luminous. By embracing your imperfections, you become more authentic. And it is this authenticity that opens the doors to genuine connections. The deepest and most fulfilling relationships emerge when two people show up whole, with both light and shadow integrated. You no longer need a partner to complete what you lack. You come as a complete being. You no longer project your fears and insecurities onto others because you have embraced them as part of yourself. Relationships are not just about feeling good. They are about growth. Every conflict, every action, every disappointment is an opportunity to understand yourself better. In this session, you will learn to see love not as an end, but as a journey of self-discovery. Until you understand this, you will continue to repeat the same mistakes. For example, if you always end up in relationships where you feel abandoned, it is because there is an abandonment wound that you need to heal. If you constantly seek people who make you feel secure, it is because there is a part of you that does not feel safe. Here, you will discover how to use love as a tool for growth, not as a goal that frustrates you. When we view love only as a source of pleasure and comfort, we lose its deeper transformative power. Relationships are life's most intense classroom, the clearest mirror of our inner world. Every person who enters your life comes with a specific lesson, and until you learn that lesson, the pattern will repeat itself. The faces may change, but the essence remains the same. Relational patterns are not accidents. If you examine your romantic history, you will find recurring themes that connect seemingly different experiences. Perhaps you always end up with emotionally distant people, or maybe you consistently attract those who need to be saved. These patterns are invitations for self-reflection, signals pointing to internal wounds that need to be acknowledged. Attachment theory teaches us that our earliest bonds shape patterns that repeat in adulthood. If, as a child, you learned that love is inconsistent, you will unconsciously seek inconsistency in your adult relationships because it feels familiar, even if painful. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward transforming them. The true purpose of romantic love is not to make you happy, though happiness can be a beautiful side effect. Its purpose is to reveal aspects of yourself that would otherwise remain hidden. It is in intimacy that your deepest fears, defense mechanisms, and unexpressed desires come to light. Love is not just about finding the right person. It is about becoming the person who can love deeply, fearlessly, and consciously. When conflict arises in your relationship, the most valuable question is not who is right, but rather, what is this situation teaching me about myself? Perhaps your disproportionate irritation over a simple comment reveals a deep-seated insecurity. Maybe your constant need for control is actually masking a deep fear of abandonment. These insights, while often uncomfortable, are treasures for those seeking personal growth. Attractions, too, serve as powerful teachers. They draw you toward aspects of yourself that you have yet to fully integrate. If you deeply admire someone's sense of freedom, it may be because you long for greater freedom in your own life. If you find yourself captivated by another person's creativity, it could be a sign that there is an artist within you, waiting to be expressed. Your most intense attractions are not random. They are maps guiding you toward unrealized aspects of your own potential. Heartbreak, while painful, presents an extraordinary opportunity for growth. When a relationship ends, you have two choices. You can blame the other person and continue repeating the same patterns, or you can turn inward and ask yourself, what can I learn from this? The difference between these two responses determines whether you become bitter or wiser from the experience. Mature love does not seek perfection in a partner. It seeks mutual growth. A relationship rooted in this mindset is not only about individual happiness, but about shared evolution. In this kind of relationship, every challenge is embraced as an opportunity to expand, to break limitations, and to heal together.
Did you know that animals listen to dominating tactics because they're scared? If you want...
Paradoxically, when you embrace love as a tool for personal growth, happiness comes more deeply and more sustainably. You no longer depend on perfect circumstances or an ideal partner to feel fulfilled. Instead, you find satisfaction in the process of evolving, of knowing yourself more intimately through the mirror that your partner provides. The shift begins when you stop saying things like, I always end up with the same kind of partner, and instead start asking, why do I keep choosing this kind of partner? This change in perspective restores your power. You are no longer a victim of fate or the actions of others. You become the conscious creator of your relational experiences. Embracing love as a path to self-growth requires courage. You must be willing to confront uncomfortable truths, to question deeply ingrained beliefs, and to let go of identities that no longer serve you. But the reward is immense. More authentic relationships, deeper self-awareness, and the ability to love from a place of freedom rather than from a place of need. Why do you always find yourself in the same kinds of relationships? The answer lies within your subconscious. The patterns you repeat over and over again are not mere coincidences. They are signals that there is something within you that needs healing. For instance, if you consistently feel drawn to people who make you suffer, it is likely that there is an unresolved emotional wound seeking attention. If you always seek validation from your partners, it may be because a part of you feels unworthy or unseen. Today, you will discover how to identify these patterns and break the cycle so you can create healthier, more conscious connections. Because until you do, you will continue attracting relationships that leave you feeling unfulfilled. Toxic relationship patterns are like invisible cycles that repeat with mathematical precision in your life. You may change partners, but the underlying dynamic remains the same. This phenomenon is not a curse, nor is it bad luck. It is the result of deeply rooted subconscious programming that influences your choices without you even realizing it. These subconscious patterns are often formed in childhood when you first learned what love meant and how relationships worked. If you grew up in an environment where love was conditional upon performance, you may now find yourself constantly seeking approval in your adult relationships. If affection in your past was often accompanied by criticism, you might feel strangely comfortable in relationships where conflict is present. The famous phrase, "what is familiar feels safe," explains why we unconsciously repeat unhealthy relationship patterns. Your brain is wired to seek the known, even when the known is painful. This is why many people leave one toxic relationship only to find themselves in another eerily similar one. The first step in breaking these patterns is developing self-awareness. Observe your relationship history as if you were watching a movie. What themes keep repeating? Do you always end up feeling abandoned? Are you drawn to emotionally unavailable people? Do you tend to lose your sense of identity in relationships? These repetitions are not coincidences. They are clues pointing to specific emotional wounds. Behind every toxic pattern lies a limiting belief. If you constantly attract people who betray you, it is likely that deep inside, you hold the belief that you do not deserve loyalty. If you always find yourself in relationships where you feel controlled, you may unconsciously believe that you are not capable of directing your own life. These beliefs act like invisible magnets, drawing experiences that confirm them. Neuroscience teaches us that these patterns are not merely psychological, they are also neurological. Through repetition, you have created strong neural connections. Breaking these circuits requires constant awareness and the deliberate creation of new experiences that contradict your habitual patterns. A powerful exercise is identifying your emotional triggers, those specific situations that elicit disproportionate reactions. Perhaps a simple delay from your partner triggers an intense fear of abandonment, or maybe a casual comment about your appearance activates a deep insecurity. These triggers are windows into your core wounds. Healing begins when you take responsibility for your patterns. This does not mean blaming yourself, but rather acknowledging your role in the creation and maintenance of these cycles. As long as you see yourself as a victim of circumstances or of others, you will remain trapped in repetition. The power to change only arises when you assume responsibility. Breaking patterns requires reconnecting with your body. Relational addictions operate similarly to other addictions. There are somatic signals that precede compulsive behaviors. Learn to recognize how attraction to toxicity feels in your body. There is an intense excitement, a false sense of security, a comforting familiarity. This recognition gives you the opportunity to consciously choose instead of reacting automatically. A fundamental step is setting clear boundaries, both with others and with yourself. If you know you tend to lose your identity in relationships, create rituals that maintain your connection with yourself. If you are drawn to people with narcissistic traits, define clearly what behaviors you will not tolerate. Boundaries are acts of self-love that interrupt patterns of self-sabotage. Real transformation happens when you dare to choose the new, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. If you have always been drawn to drama and intensity, a calm and stable relationship may initially seem boring. This discomfort is normal. You are creating new neural circuits, new ways of experiencing connection. Remember that breaking patterns is not a one-time event, but a continuous process. There will be moments of regression, temptations to return to what is familiar. Each time you recognize the pattern and choose differently, you strengthen your new path. Neuroplasticity is on your side. With each new choice, you literally rewire your brain. The ultimate...
Okay, I'm going to stop it. Let's get out of this. And we have a bunch of other ones.
Well, but let's get a little feedback from our
Sure.
participants on how this is resonated and what what you think it means to you, and does it,
I mean, I deliberately picked that video because it deals with nothing that I talked about earlier. Okay. A lot of people might be surprised that Jung had anything to say about love. But there you have it. So
how did that resonate for you? It looked like you recognize things in it. Just looking at your face from the outside. What
was it me making a love facial? Okay. Yeah, I hadn't seen that video before. It's so much to unpack, but a lot of it did resonate with me, and I took a few notes. It kind of like led me to think about Hemingway a little bit too, because Hemingway had been married so many times, and one of the things, I can't say it word for word, but in so many ways, he thought about what it meant to love two people and actually love two people the same way. He did say it distinctively somehow, and it was much more eloquent than what I'm saying. But the fact that I feel like when I think of Hemingway, he lived so much. Like, I almost feel jealous because he had, married and remarried and fell in love and, lived so much life, more so than, like, in my mind, I feel timid to do some of those things because I feel like I play it safe. So I was thinking, my mind went there when I was listening. I was also thinking about, authentic love and people who grow together, because it's such a difficult thing. Because sometimes people grow apart because we're drawn in different ways, and I just don't know how absolutely normal it is for two people to actually grow together. This also leads me to think more about, like, Tolstoy, and the way Tolstoy thought about, like, the human condition, and how we love and how it it's sort of a wave as opposed to, you know, stagnant, be together forever sort of things, the way we learn about marriage when, you know, we marry and stay together forever. And then the other thing, I was just wondering, I don't know the answer to this question, if he was ever married. Um, so that's, I'll leave it there. Those are all the things that went through my mind as I was listening, but yeah.
If Jung was ever married?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I don't,
That's an interesting
I'm
question.
pretty sure he was.
Yes, he was.
And he had children, but he had, I mean, for example, there was this woman, what was her name, Maria? She studied the fairy tales, the archetypes that come out in fairy tales.
Right. But
And
they worked with him, but they didn't have, but he had a mistress for many, many years and a wife who both worked with him. And they worked with each other, you know, and it was interesting. But I think his wife represented more of the mother archetype for him, and the mistress was more of the anima for him. And
I'm
but
not surprised by that.
so it was complicated, as they say.
And and no judgment there, because the more I think about this, it's don't want to go too far into religion, but you know, to some extent, sometimes I do wonder about the way Muslims live and the way that they, um, you know, the way they see marriage. Yeah, that's probably an extreme, but anyway, I do see.
I think many people view it as a medieval society view of marriage, not necessarily a modern view of marriage.
Mhm.
For
Yeah.
me, it's about what works for the people involved, you know, and that does have a historical context, you know, for most of us. But I think it worked for, it was Tony, I think. Wolf
Mhm.
was the mistress. And I think she was very happy because she was an avid student of it all, and he was training her very profoundly.
Mhm.
And it might have been a bit incestuous. You know, they had a lot of relationships in one relationship. You know, that's what I would personally be concerned about. But they knew that, you know, and I think they were very conscious in all of it. And his wife, I'm trying to think, I think it was Eva, she was a psychoanalyst as well. So they were all working together, and I think they could all articulate these things, you know, in a conscious way, that maybe they needed this complexity for their own complexity. You know, they had complex psyches, and this was a way to process it all. Um, from what I gather, she was more unhappy than the mistress was, but she found her own way. You know, she had her own work. She was publishing, and she was respected, and you know, she had her own place in it all. And as also the mistress was much younger, and her life went on and her work went on for, you know, for many years, and it never would have been the same without having crossed paths with both of them. You know, so I think these things are, you know, for me, for these people to work out, you know, amongst themselves. It's not for, you know, for me to even have an opinion about it. It's not what I would be comfortable with. You know, I'm extremely psychologically monogamous, but that's got nothing to do with it. You know, and when I was trained to work with clients, what I was supposed to discern is it harmful to them in any way? Or is it just my judgment? and that I shouldn't be imposing my judgment. I should, you could be judgmental about whether it's harmful or not, but it may be exactly the lessons that these people needed to learn. And I think on some level, these are soul contracts that are formed, early in the relationship, if not before it, that have their purposes.
Yeah.
That's what I would say, that there's a
I mean,
purpose.
I think of the French, and I
Right.
think of two examples out of France. One is Mitterrand, when he died, the receiving line for all these heads of state, at the head of the receiving line was his mistress. His wife was behind the mistress. That's the French view of these things, according to that's what Mitterrand wanted. And then I think of Picasso, who, when he was near the end, he confessed that he had encounters with thousands of women, all these women throwing themselves at him, and he felt terrible about doing this. Well, I was wondering, didn't it cross his mind what he was doing here? But it's very French in the psyche of what it means to be French. So anyway,
I like that you brought up Hemingway and his pondering of it all, and um,
Yeah, and
a
sorry.
psychological view, but go on.
Yeah, sorry. No, I also feel like there's some aspect of it too that like people who are deeply spiritual really need solitude, like really need to be alone, time alone, to spend time alone. And so not that I'm encouraging like, having the wife and the mistress, but at the same time, maybe even the wife and the mistress there are moments where they could be comfortable with a situation like that because um, someone else is there to fill the space for that person, not only physically, but mentally. And that mental capacity, you can save her for yourself to do something else, to really get to know yourself better. So I really don't
Right.
think I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, in our society, obviously here, especially Fairfield County, obviously, but come back all the way to Earth, it is a terrible, terrible thing. But I feel like where there's a situation with mutual understanding, um, I don't see any harm in it. I actually think it could be healthy for some people. So,
I think that's a very enlightened point of view, and it's um, likely to be true. And yeah, I just try not to judge other people and other ways of life that, as Bart is pointing out, it's somewhat cultural. And people have their own individual cultures or, their family culture.
yeah.
And there's reasons for it that I don't really, it's none of my business. I don't need to know it,
Mhm.
if it seems to work for them. Um, I don't know, some people, as you said, it gives you a kind of privacy. It gives you a kind of space to
Mhm.
not be the be all and end all that we expect in, Western culture for monogamy. Um,
we left Bruce out. Bruce, do you want to chime in? Any comments?
Hi, come on in
Uh,
here.
I have a very different approach to love. From a meditative point of view, uh, love is a level of reality in the mind, a deep, deep level of the mind, where it sees everything is in union. All things that are alive, there is love, and that you connect with that level of love. So it's not quite so personal. It's a reality.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well said. Well said. Let's do one more, and then we might call it a night. Let's try see what we've got here. Hold on. this over here. Oh, wait, I forgot to check one thing. Hold on.
I thought what he was saying about the reflection is really interesting.
Yeah. No, yeah, it was okay.
And as I get older, I see it very differently.
Okay, everybody see this?
Yep.
Naturally gifted souls so often end up in the most difficult and painful families. Why do those who can see through the noise and feel more deeply than others become the odd one out, misunderstood and rejected even in their own home? It's not an accident, it's a journey. Your pain is not a punishment, it's a preparation. Carl Jung, the great psychologist and philosopher, said that each of us comes into this world with the potential for individuation, a process that leads us to the truest, most whole version of ourselves. But for some, that process begins in chaos. For those who are here to raise the collective consciousness, transformation begins at the heart of dysfunction. It's no accident that you were born into a family that feels more like a battlefield than a safe haven. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you really are." But here's the rub. Who you really are isn't found in comfort. It's created in chaos. When your childhood is filled with manipulation, control, rejection, or neglect, you are forced to look outside your family for a source of love. And that source is something greater than human support. It is a connection to a higher power, the universe, or your higher self. Toxic families are not the cause of your talent, but the environment that sharpens it. The constant pressure to prove your worth, the emotional unpredictability, and the devaluation of your truth all push you inward toward the only sanctuary left, your connection to the divine. This is why the black sheep are always the most spiritually powerful. You are not the only one who sees differently. You are the one who feels what others are afraid to face. And while others around you sleep in their illusions,
For senior women who keep going strong, discover lightweight, all-day comfort in your new wardrobe savior.
Sorry.
you have been forced to wake up early. You have been forced to understand love through contrast and to master empathy because you have tasted cruelty. This is not just poetic, it is deeply psychological. Jung taught that the shadow, the unconscious wounded part of the psyche, must be brought into the light for transformation to occur. You were born into darkness not to become it, but to understand it, to experience it, and to transform it into wisdom. If you grow up in a family that bullies you, tries to control your thoughts, ridicules your intuition, or ignores your emotional needs, they don't realize that they are actually creating something unstoppable, your spiritual immunity. You learn not to chase validation, to hear your inner voice above the outside noise, and to stand tall when everyone around you tries to put you down. And here's the spiritual plot twist. You needed this environment because your soul came here for a reason. You came here for mastery, to be who you were meant to be in this life, to offer your gifts fully to the world. From a young age, you had to learn to stand up for your truth, even if it's unpopular. How do you protect your peace in chaos? How do you not care what others think? Because being the center of attention will never be safe until you learn to thrive in the shadows. Some families are more like spiritual prisons than safe havens. If you grew up in an environment where you were constantly misunderstood, shamed for being too different, or emotionally punished for speaking your truth, know this: you are not alone and you are not cursed. You are chosen. But being chosen does not begin in the light. It begins in the shadow, and that shadow often wears the face of those closest to you. When Carl Jung explored the psyche, he spoke of the family as the primary environment that shapes the soul. And while many associate family with comfort and bonds of togetherness, Jung warned that unresolved trauma passed down from generation to generation creates what he called complexes, emotional wounds that dictate our behavior from the unconscious. And you, the chosen one, were born into the very center of this storm. A toxic family system is not an accident. It is a karmic class. You have incarnated into an environment that will test every part of your being, not to destroy you, but to awaken you. When love is transactional, when emotions are devalued, when you are punished for existing as your authentic self, you are being forced into early spiritual consciousness, not because you are weak, but because your soul has said, I am ready. Ready to remember your worth without applause, ready to find inner security without external approval, ready to release ancestral patterns so deep they have become invisible in your lineage. Jung believed that the path to wholeness requires confrontation with the shadow, the rejected parts of yourself and society. You were born into a family where the shadow ruled. It wasn't a mistake, it was your assignment. Every toxic family has a scapegoat, someone who refuses to submit, who questions everything, who is called dramatic, selfish, crazy, difficult. And this is usually the most spiritually advanced person in the room. You weren't born to support dysfunction, you were born to destroy it. This dysfunction doesn't look loud. It looks like a silent refusal to betray yourself, even if it costs you connection. It looks like crying alone after being gaslighted and choosing to trust your gut anyway. It looks like healing wounds you shouldn't have to carry, but you do anyway, so they end with you. Being the odd one out is painful, yes, but it's also sacred, because to step outside the system is to see it clearly, and only those who see this clearly can begin to change it. Toxic families don't just ignore your emotional needs. They teach you to neglect yourself. They mold you into roles, the caretaker, the provider, the invisible. They reward you for betraying your truth and punish you for expressing it. But what happens beneath the surface is alchemy. Every time you are unloved for your truth, you learn to value authenticity over approval. Every time control masquerades as protection, you learn to reclaim your sovereignty. Every time you are denied gentleness, you become a generator of your own gentleness. This is not done to glorify suffering, but to honor its spiritual function. These wounds do not break you, they awaken you. They take you away from conditional love and push you into unconditional union with Source, your soul, something deeper than this world has ever shown you. The truth is this: your family was your first spiritual battlefield, and just as warriors do not train in peaceful meadows, your soul did not choose to incarnate where things were easy. You chose intensity, you chose distortion, you chose mirrors that would show you who you are not, so that you could remember exactly who you are. You are love, not control. You are truth, not gaslighting. You are connection, not guilt. This is your sacred initiation. And while others may inherit the family script and repeat it, you are the one who said, "It ends with me." That is the price and privilege of being chosen. Let's talk about what happens when your light begins to break through the illusion. Because the uncomfortable truth is that when you begin to grow, toxic people are not always welcoming. They criticize, ridicule, manipulate you, or worse, try to drag you back into the chaos you have already outgrown. Because your growth threatens their illusions, your healing violates their comfort zone, your clarity reflects something they have not encountered themselves. That is why staying grounded is no longer optional for you. It is necessary. You are not here to earn their approval. You are here to stay connected to your source. When you maintain a consistent frequency, no storm around you can knock you off course. So how do you protect your light when you are still living among people who do not understand your path, who criticize, ridicule, or try to control your energy? Here are 3 spiritual tools that are not only comforting, but transformative. The first tool is the spiritual umbilical cord. Imagine a glowing cord of light extending from your navel up into the sky and reaching to the source itself. Not just a vague idea of God, but a tangible connection to unconditional love, wisdom, and power. This cord is your divine supply line. It gives you what your environment cannot. When you feel empty, judged, unnoticed, go back to that image. Imagine light pouring into your body, strength into your bones, peace into your heart, clarity into your mind. Let that spiritual food nourish you when human love is lacking. You never disconnect, you just have to remember to reconnect. This is not just a metaphor. Your nervous system responds to your beliefs and imagination. So when you believe that something greater is supporting you, your body literally calms down and re-regulates. That is the power of staying spiritually connected. The second tool is simple but life-saving. Stop taking their predictions personally. Toxic environments often reflect the same thing. You are too much, you are not enough, you are selfish, you have changed. None of this is real. What they say is a reflection of what they refuse to face inside themselves. This is Jung's concept of the shadow, the disowned parts of the psyche that are projected onto others. When they accuse you of being difficult, manipulative, dramatic, it's more of a revelation of their inner chaos than it is of your truth. So practice this. When someone tries to shame or humiliate you, stop and say to yourself, "That's not me, that's their shadow." It doesn't mean you're perfect, but it does mean you refuse to carry guilt that's not yours. That's sovereignty. And you know what? When you stop absorbing their shame, it has nowhere to stick. It bounces off. You become immune. Here's the third tool, and it can be the hardest, especially if you're still under the same roof as the people who hurt you. You don't have to have constant access to someone who's trying to dim your light. Distance is not disrespect. Boundaries are not betrayal. You are allowed to love someone and protect their world. You are allowed to care and say no. You are allowed to grieve the family you wish you had while creating the life you deserve. If you can walk away from a toxic dynamic, do so lovingly and without guilt. But if you can't walk away yet, create pockets of spiritual safety. Spend time with like-minded souls, even if it's just an online group, a YouTube teacher, or the only friend who sees you. Find people who will lift your frequency, not empty it. You don't have to heal in isolation. The more time you spend with people who reflect your soul, not your wound, the faster your light will stabilize. You weren't thrown into a toxic family by accident. You were placed there because your soul had the power to alchemize pain into purpose, and now you do. These tools aren't just spiritual junk, they are soul survival gear. They help you stay rooted in the reality beyond the chaos. Realities where your worth is not questioned, your love is not used as a weapon, and your voice is not silenced. So if you're struggling today, go back to your source. Remember the cord, remember who you are, and remember you were never broken. You were just being groomed. The world may not have honored you yet, but your path is sacred, and you walk it with millions of other souls. Let's be real. Sometimes the spiritual path doesn't feel illuminating. It feels like a complete failure. You may have moments when you just want to disappear, when the weight of misunderstanding, the silence of feeling alone, and the pain of emotional exile seem unbearable, when nothing makes sense, and even God seems silent. But that doesn't mean you're broken, it means you're opening up. The chosen ones often walk on the edge of despair because the pressure is so great. That's not weakness, that's the soul stretching wide enough to birth a new frequency into this world. So if you have ever numbed your pain with distractions, addictions, overthinking, or dissociation, don't judge yourself. This was your nervous system trying to survive, but now you are ready to thrive. You cannot give up, not because you owe it to anyone else, but because your presence here is a gift. Your existence right now at this time is not an accident. You are part of a global wave of souls awakening to higher consciousness. And your pain was not meaningless, it was preparation. You were not just healing, you were evolving. This planet is changing, old systems are crumbling, new paradigms are emerging, and the chosen ones are the blueprints for what comes next. You carry within you the empathy, the vision, the spiritual stamina, and the raw humanity that will help guide others through their darkness. But to do so, you must survive your own. Once you break through the illusion, once you stop looking for love from those who never learned to give it, your gifts begin to grow. Clarity arises, you suddenly feel truth in your body without overanalyzing it.
As I've traveled the world I've seen how we've become lost in not.
Sensitivity becomes power. You sense things before they happen, tune into emotions as frequencies, and use that intuition as a compass. Empathy transforms from an emotional burden into a healing force. You know how to hold space for others without losing yourself in their pain. Creativity, once blocked by fear, begins to flow. Words, ideas, visuals, healing practices, they flow through you like water through an unblocked channel. And most importantly, you stop waiting for permission. You begin to live authentically out loud. This is the emergence of the chosen one. But here's the catch. When you've been in survival mode for so long, pain can begin to feel familiar, even safe. Depression whispers, stay small, stay hidden. It's safer that way. Addictions, whether they're substances, people, overwork, or numbness, say, you don't have to feel this right now, but you're not here to be numb. You're here to feel and still rise. You're not too damaged. You're not too late. You're not too tired. Every time you choose to feel instead of freeze, every time you choose to stay instead of run, you reclaim a piece of your soul. There are people you've yet to meet who will be transformed by your story, but you must live it first. Family may never apologize. Approval may never come. Healing may never be acknowledged by the people who broke you, but it doesn't matter because your liberation doesn't need their input. Your peace doesn't require their understanding, and your light doesn't depend on their permission. You are proof that darkness can create galaxies, and you are the reason that someone else will keep going one day. You are not falling behind. You are being guided, and everything you thought was holding you back from your destiny was actually shaping you for it. So keep going, not just for the purpose, but because every step forward is a revolution. If you have come this far, you already know. You are not a victim of your history. You are the author of a new paradigm. Chosen ones, do not underestimate how much power it takes to break free and continue to love, trust, create, and shine. This power is divine. So when the world seems cold, return to the source. Tap into that golden cord of love. Let it fill you again. You are not alone. You are not lost. You are becoming. And the world has been waiting for you to be exactly who you are here to be.
I just want to say, I don't think that's out of Jung's thinking directly.
No, I think there's a big leap there.
I don't know that he would disagree with it, but it's not, and I don't necessarily either, but I just don't think it's per se his voice there.
Yeah.
Which is okay. I mean, I thought that was still something.
Yeah, when I heard the word gaslighted, I thought, well, they weren't using that word back then. So this is probably some AI taps in a little bit. It might be some of his words and then, you know, they modernize it. I think they do that now. They are sort of custom making some of these videos.
And there's a whole pile of these. Okay, they're out there on YouTube now. Within the last year.
Yeah, there's
his face there.
There's a lot, but you know, this one actually, Bruce, do you mind if I go? I keep I'm so like, I'm in love with this session. Sorry, I do you want to say something? Or am I gonna keep talking? Sorry. Do you mind if I share my feedback?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
Bruce?
Yeah, he's like, okay.
What? Yeah, you go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So I took a lot from this one. This one was my 15-year-old came in and actually interrupted me. He was like, what are you doing? I'm like, get out of here. Yeah, he has varsity soccer and varsity basketball, so he's a little bit of a show off. But you know, I was unpacking and making a few notes, and actually something gave me a little bit of PTSD when he brought up validation. And I think I had spent 13 years working at Tiffany's in New York.
Wow.
And I started out in the diamond buying office, and then I moved up and became a gemologist, and didn't really have I had a great time in the beginning. I was young, I was only 19. Everybody thought, you know, it was great. But then when I realized after I had taken most of the certificate diploma courses that were required for gemology at the time and doing the appraisals that we were doing, when I realized that I kept asking for more promotions, I realized I wasn't going to go any higher. I think that was really hard for me. But then the reason why I brought up validation, because I think after I left Tiffany's, I just never really cared about validation. So like, even my husband gets really annoyed with this. like if I do something and then like he's like, well, that person should have sent you a thank you note or something. I'm like, I'm moving on to the next thing already. Like I'm never looking for any validation. If I do get like a thank you, makes me kind of happy and I'm like, oh, okay, great. But I really never do anything to receive validation. And so I don't know if that's like something that I don't know if it's a good thing, but I really feel like it kind of is because I just never want to do things for like an ulterior motive, right? So, but my husband doesn't really understand that. He's like, yeah, you did this for so and so, and hey, they're gonna, you should feel so good about that. And I'm like, I'm already doing like 5 more things. I'm not even, I guess I don't take the time to soak things up. I just keep sort of going because I'm not looking for the validation. And it feels very normal to me. I don't even think about it. So, and then the other thing he was talking about, like bringing yourself back to like, like pockets of spiritual safety. Um, I really felt like that was so important because one of the things that I find that's been helpful to me, I've been doing for maybe the past, I would say 3 or 4 months or so. In the morning, I make it a routine to read the prayer of St. Francis.
Wow.
It's like if I even forget, I halfway through the day, I stop and read it. It gives me like a strong calm, like just brings me back and also like just tames the ego if the ego comes up too much. And then I one last note I made, I feel guided. Like I feel like sometimes, I get up, my husband's like, oh, well, what's your plan for today? And I'm like, some days I have like rigid plans where it's like, okay, I have an appointment there and I'm doing things, but I think most of the times I feel like I'm waiting to be guided. And then I look for signs, I look for symbols. Sometimes it comes in numbers. Sometimes I see the same numbers all the time. And to me, I interpret that as like angels speaking to me. And when I see those numbers or certain things, like if I'm outside, I see a certain bird or I don't know. I always look for certain signs in nature or something to guide me on like what I should do today. And this is how I met you guys. Like I was like, I think I picked up the Natural Awakening magazine because I was feeling sort of like lost that day. Like I just really need to come back to some kind of guidance. And I'm like, I always find something good in this book. I'm gonna pick up this book. And that's how I found you guys. And so it's like, yeah, it's hard to explain, but and I am on this alone. And that whole thing about family is like that's completely me. I'm like the weirdo in my family that nobody understands.
Good for you.
Yeah, yeah. And not just my immediate family here. I mean my parents and my siblings.
Yeah, Bruce, I just want to explain what you're saying. That Natural Awakenings is a little
local
magazine here that covers Fairfield County, Connecticut. And so it has, people doing yoga and
yeah,
tarot reading and all kinds of things like that. So we advertise our class in it. We also, advertise labyrinth walks in it. So there's a calendar in there
yeah,
and that's what Elise saw.
yeah.
I used to write articles for it and all that, but I haven't had the time or been around. But it's a nice local instrument that brings people together. So I'm glad you saw it and it resonated for you,
Yeah.
Elise.
Yeah.
And we're glad you reached out and you know, we're always wondering, does anybody care? You know, is there anybody hearing it? Is anybody out there? So it's gratifying when we see that people watch it on their own a lot, and that's great. But it's nice when people show up and interact with us. We really appreciate that. And you've been really welcome. And you know, I sense that you're a solo explorer. You know, you're off on your own.
Yeah, I am more so now because it really started more with like a Course in Miracles book club. And that book club, I've outgrown it. I started kind of seeking in other ways, and yeah, it's a little bit different now. So I I am grateful for you guys so that I have some type of guidance to tame me, because sometimes you have to be careful. I think you might go into different energies that are not, you know, maybe not positive, good energy. So I yeah, I think you have to be careful because it's not what we could physically see with our eyes. They're unseen unseen energies.
I don't think that there's bad energies. I think that what you're talking about is absence of good energy.
I like that. So thank you. Yeah, that's better. That's better. Yeah, thank you. So Bruce, I'll let you come in.
Oh no, it's I've been, you know, meditating for what, 50 years. So it's like I'm in my 80s now. So it's like there's understandings from meditation that are not that common.
Bruce has achieved enlightenment. So he sees much more deeply what you think is reality is not what Bruce sees.
Yeah, but a
so,
lot of it is just what they call appearance.
yeah, so if I could share something that I witnessed, why I mentioned going into different energies, or you know, Bart worded it much more correctly, but I think there was a time when I was sort of really drifting into just thoughts, right? Because your thoughts, you know, sometimes or the absence of thought, right? And I began to see like an alien form, and I got scared. And then there was another time when I woke up in the middle of the night, and like it was kind of like maybe 3 a.m., something like that. I just saw purple shadows dancing around the room, like just dancing around. And I had to think, am I awake? Like, and I had to like say, okay, I'm really awake. And I danced around the room, and then just for a while, and then just danced out the window. And I wasn't afraid, but I was like, what's that? So I think there are times that I was getting into something where I felt like I probably should step back a little bit with my kind of like, you know, thinking alone.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys ever witnessed anything that you felt like you wanted to pull back because it might have not scare you, but like make you wonder what reality you're in or something.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I
that happened.
had a point, I was around 29, 30, where I just felt I needed to slow down, that I was just going too fast. And that's really when I started working with Jung. And I did that because I felt he had charted a lot of the unfamiliar territory in a way that I could trust. But I think some people, you know, can fall into errors there too. I mean, you can with any system. But I've just felt like I don't want to do this all on my own. I want some tracks, you know, laid to follow where people have gone before.
Yeah.
And I want to learn some systems that, you know, there's lineages of approaches that people have practiced for many, many years and passed on and mastered, because it can be dangerous. It can be overwhelming for the psyche, you know, and you can get into some.
Yeah, there's a story about that gentleman, Sadhguru, that they talk about his wife. I think there's rumors still that they said he murdered his wife, but apparently the story goes that his wife had gone into deep meditation and didn't come back. If you heard of that, but
yeah, that can happen.
Well, in terms of my own experience of meditation, is that if you like spend an hour watching the mind, you learn all about these little tricks and little flips that the mind does. So after a long time, you find out that they don't arise anymore, because the mind has actually, in a sense, transcended it, because it's seen what it is and it's gone. So that's the benefit of meditation, is you're not subject to these negative things that arise in the mind, because you've kind of you know, touched on a deeper level of your own mind where they don't exist, or something like that. I don't know, it's hard to explain. But basically your mind is pure already. I mean, you get all these things floating in the mind where you think it might not be, but it's actually just a conditioning from the past or something. Your mind is actually pure in its own. And that's what you find out. When you find that reality out, though, then a lot of these things don't affect you anymore.
yeah, I think it's also this gentleman, Sydney Banks. Is that his name? Sydney Banks. He talks about the thought and like the thought. Yeah, like it's like your thought. Like your thought is the problem. It's what you're thinking. It's not the problem. It's what you're thinking of as a problem.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So when you watch these things for like an hour, like you actually pass through them, and you get to a point where you're not fooled anymore. The mind already has seen that, and it's not for real, and so you're not subject to it anymore. That's where sort of the meditation does. You just go deeper into your own mind, what's actually really there, things like that. Because negative emotions are basically illusion, and you come to realize that directly, so that you're no longer subject to it. But getting there, you know, it takes hours of meditation. You don't get there just a few hours. So apply yourself for a long
Yeah,
time.
I actually had a situation recently where we had a family meeting, and one of my sisters that sort of like holds a grudge with me, like kept throwing out the bait. You know, Alith didn't do this. Alith didn't do this. Alith hasn't done this. I was really masking in it because I stayed so silent. So I stayed silent the whole time, and then you know, she said, well, this is not a time to be silent, and stayed silent, and then I think she said, well, at least you have, you know, anything to say. And so I finally responded and said, no, I don't have anything to say.
Yeah.
So I was so happy when I got off, because I was like, oh, this is great. And like now it's a sport, you know, it's a sport.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah. But it takes a while to get there, because
that's right.
You know, we take the bait. We tend to take the bait, and I just yeah, it's beautiful. I felt so good.
Yeah, that's where you got to go.
Yeah. Wow, you guys are amazing. I mean, so many more people should be on this. On this call, Bart, I mean, you have to maybe somehow get this to the universities. I
We're
feel like
building it up, Lee. It's building, and again, people time shift. It's not always the easiest time, so
yeah,
they look at when they can do it on their own.
yeah, but a lot of your lessons are like university level, like well, we're trying to reach people earlier. I mean, even if you could reach people in high school with some of this philosophy would be wonderful, because it would cut down a lot of this thing that they're calling anxiety, you know.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
the how to say it, I told Marjorie we're basically into year 5 out of 25. And it's
that's
really
right,
only,
that's right.
it's only late when this will really kick in and people will recognize something that's here. But for now, we want to survey as many of these ideas as possible, from 50,000 feet and get people interested in them.
Mhm.
There's so little interest in, things have swung so far toward materialism and away from any meaningful spirituality as part of your daily life. And I just don't believe that's right.
I think at this point it actually makes many people uncomfortable.
Mhm.
It's threatening to their status quo, and they don't know what to do with it, so they just avoid it. And
Well, it's also lack of authenticity as well. And I think during COVID, a lot more people, I don't think COVID was such a bad thing, because I think a lot more people, they turn inward and
be completely.
they started
Well,
making time for things they never normally would make time for. So,
well, that's when we started the class, and Bruce knows this. We had a hardcore group of about 8 people that were always there during COVID from all over the place.
I found
wow.
COVID to be a huge relief,
Hmm.
that I didn't have to go through so many motions that I didn't want to. And
Hmm.
went for long walks at the beach every day.
Yeah.
I've just spent lots of quiet time
Hmm.
and reflecting, and it was what I wanted to be doing. I didn't have to show up for all that other stuff. And in some ways, I think Zoom has been, people complain about it. I think it's brought people together in a lot of ways, and we get these real close-ups, of each other's faces that I think can be more intimate than being together in person. It's different, and yes, something may be missing, but I think we also gain things,
Hmm.
and so
Yeah.
I'm always seeing the silver lining, as I think you're saying. There were a lot of gifts to it, and I
Yeah.
think we're still coming to understand it.
I'm going back to Jung a little bit, because I was thinking how I didn't know that he was a Christian. And what I know about being Christian now is very different from what I used to think about being Christian was. Like, I didn't grow up like believing in Jesus. I thought, oh, this is a story they talk about and they just want you to believe it. Um, it was through actually A Course in Miracles where I started to believe in Jesus. That it wasn't even the church. So, um, I mean, this guy, his mind is like science, subconscious, like super conscious. And then he's also a Christian, right? I don't know. It's like I think we have to do a part 2, because there's so much more to. I'm taking it too far now. Like I didn't know a lot of these things that you mentioned about him. I really didn't know. I only knew like very little.
Wouldn't
So,
say he's a Christian in the conventional sense.
No.
It's a different, it's really like a more mystical
oh,
sense
okay.
of,
Yeah, I would say Jung, with his belief in this collective unconscious, that
Okay.
he doesn't think of it as a man on a throne with a beard and a robe and all these cherubim around with harps singing stuff. He doesn't think that at all. He sees this collective unconscious everywhere throughout all of space and time, and we all have a piece of it in us. Which is why he said, "I know God." That was his.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that because I don't know, I'm from Jamaica, right? Bob Marley does that similar thing where he's like, he says something, it's in patois, but it's like he says, believe will like mess you up, but if you know, then
Yeah,
that's different. Like you need to
yeah,
know, which I think I like that. Yeah.
yeah,
Wow, I didn't know he said that. I think
Ye-
that's very
Yeah,
deep.
yeah.
it's in total like Jamaican like slang, but it's just I can kind of translate it a little
Oh,
bit.
sure.
Yeah.
But Jung did write one book that we covered, his answer to Job. The book of Job is, when you look in the Torah in the Old Testament, you have Genesis, which is really atypical. And the book of Job is the other one that just, where did this come from? And it's a story of Job, who had a wife and kids and was leading a perfectly happy life and loved God. And for whatever reason, God got together with the devil, and, the uh, devil said, "Well, I bet I can get Job to get away from you." And God, for whatever reason, said, "Okay, you're on. Go ahead.
Took a bet.
Yeah, game on. Go ahead and do it." So Job has his wife die, his kids all die. He ends up with all kinds of diseases. He loses all his money. His estate's all gone. He's just absolutely nothing. And yet through it all, Job is there believing in God. And and
Believing that God was good.
yeah. And of course, this raises the question of, if God is everything, then how can God encompass evil? Like, where did this devil come from? Okay, if it's not part of God. So, so then, having watched all this and seen what happened, then the devil says, "Okay, I flunked," and so Job ends up getting remarried and has 10 times the amount of money and more kids than ever, and that's how things end. So Jung is writing this to say, if you look at this here, you're talking about how this all-knowing, all-powerful entity can in fact encompass this notion of evil. How is that possible? And that was his answer to Job. That was why he wrote it in a big rush, because he said, "Now I see, so I'm going to go write this." And he could write really fast.
That's a great story. And that's why also even in this that video, he said every lesson, like every, like I could think of like people who are vindictive at work, or, I used to see someone coming and go, oh my God, that person is like gonna do this. But they're there to teach you something.
Yeah.
Even your worst
But
enemy.
Job taught God something.
Yeah. So sometimes God comes in ways like that, I guess, to teach us, to be stronger, to overcome.
His thesis was that God realized that Job had wisdom and maturity that he did not, that God did not.
Right.
And that was because God was just part of the oneness and not individuated. So this is what,
And which is why he created the world, was to grow and to have the individuation occurring, so that he could grow and knew what he was getting stale.
So he could have the experience. It's all about experience. We're in here. Yes, it's an illusion. It's an illusion of a separation that's not there. But when we digest that and grow through it and evolve through it, that's the point.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just this ball of, mayonnaise. It's all one, and it's not experiencing anything. It's not growing.
And you
it's
and you
not-
evolve or change as
right.
a result of this. So it's an ongoing process. It isn't a one shot. Oh, I got it. Okay.
But what Jung's thesis was that God decided I need to experience separation, which sounds like one of the most blasphemous thoughts you could ever have. You know, that God needs to learn something by being limited. But I think it's a really fascinating conundrum, you know, because if everything is one, then it, it's really like then there's nothing, you know, without that illusion of the separation. And this is a very Kabbalistic thought that you need to have that experience. And God realized that God needed that experience that Job was having, because Job had more compassion and wisdom and maturity than God did.
You would have never made the bet.
Right, right. And Job was dealing with this with respect and love and awe. He wasn't putting God down, but he was bigger than God because he had individuated. So the theory of Jung's interpretation is really that God decided he needed to incarnate as a finite human in order to understand what Job understood.
And that became Yeshua or Jesus of Nazareth.
And that's what he sent to the planet, was himself in that form, so he could experience limitation. And that was God's answer to Job, was to send Jesus, which I think is a really deep
So
thought.
no matter how you cut it, this is not your normal Christian view.
Right.
Well, also suffering is there's like in this he said finding your purpose in pain. Like I mean, I think about Jesus suffering on the cross. Whenever I feel like I'm suffering, I feel like, oh my God, like this is not real suffering. But you know, I mean, it's relative, right? It's relative because like when I went to volunteer in Tanzania, back in 2005, I came back to New York and I saw people on the train, they were begging for money, and I I remember how my sentiments changed, how I felt like you're living in a country with resources, like you know, and there are places where people have no resources. But I think, you know, after a while that also tempers down a little bit, where it's just me feeling a little bit like really bad about the experience that I had, and all the poverty that I had witnessed at that time. Yeah, but I wish that somehow we could interject some of this into like Bible studies, because I don't see, I think the churches, what I found, because we were going to Darien, we, first of all, we're Quakers, then I'm a convinced Quaker, as married Quaker. We went to Darien Congregational Church. Now we're at Greenfield Hill Congregational Church, which I like very much, but I do a Bible study with a group of women in Darien called Soul Sisters. But what I find with the churches are that they really like to limit the conversations to the Bible only, because I think that they're afraid that some of the congregation may not be ready to go any deeper. So for me, sometimes I feel like, well, I get so much from Bible studies and you know, sometimes sitting in church, which I appreciate. Um, I I always feel like it doesn't go deep enough for me. Like even this Sunday I went, and the preacher, she was talking about, she was giving out roses, thanking people for some service that they did in the church. And to be honest, my husband goes every Sunday and I don't go every Sunday, but he was being thanked and I thought it would look really bad if I didn't go. So I went. Anyway, she said something in her sermon about like Solomon, like the Temple of Solomon. And she mentioned it because she was talking about, I don't know if you guys know this, but Greenfield Hill in Fairfield is having their 300-year anniversary. And so they're doing a lot of research around it. But anyway, she was talking about the architecture of the church. And immediately that brings my mind to like the Masons. But obviously she doesn't bring up the Masons in her sermon. She brings up the Temple of Solomon and then a little bit about something else, but doesn't go any deeper, then switches to like another scripture in the Bible. And I always feel so cheated sometimes, you know, I wonder if there's, you know, some way to collaborate with the church to get some of this messaging out, because it may resonate with some of the church members that are looking for something more, you know, that want to grow, because this whole thing is growing. Like that's one of the reasons why when I did A Course in Miracles, I loved it, but then I just felt like, what's next? You know, I'm ready for like, what's next? So
Sure.
You're making me think of a wonderful class I took at the Jung Institute, actually, in New York. And I was one of the few students in it who wasn't clergy or studying to be clergy. And they all had to swear to not, you know, start speaking in tongues or, you know, expecting it to be dogma. And they all did, and they were very good about it. And it actually became really interesting studying with them. But this was the text, you know, this was the main text was this Answer to Job by Jung. And it was very interesting. I had a classmate who went on to become a full analyst there, and he came and gave a lecture for us once. But he was in the class, and I knew him from years before. When we were both in
Did
training.
they actually speak in tongues, Marjorie?
No.
Oh, you just said that. Okay.
I was
So,
being kind of facetious.
Yeah.
because
Tongue
yeah,
in cheek, tongue in cheek.
yeah. Yeah, I heard one in my whole life, this one woman, I remember she spoke in tongues to me. It was so scary. When I was in Brooklyn, I was making extra money by like braiding hair when I was in high school. And there was this elderly lady, she always wanted me to braid her hair, and went to her house and was braiding her hair. Oh my God, this is so long ago. This is like maybe late 80s. And I told her about a dream that I had had. I can't remember what it was. And all of a sudden she just started speaking in tongues. And and I was so like, and she did, and then she stopped after maybe like a minute or two. And she said to me that she said, the spirit told me that you should put olive oil on your head or something like that. And I was like, okay. But I remember, because when you're alone with the person, there's no one else in the house. And I was like really young. I was like, this is scary. Yeah, it was a Jamaican lady, and she was, I think I remember her name is Stevens or something like that. And she broke out in tongues, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
I don't understand what that is. I never really, I haven't dived into that yet. Like that's not something I even understand. So.
Look, it's 9 o'clock.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we're okay.
No. Marjorie is always on me for getting the hook, but you know, let's call it a night. It's a great start. Again, next week is going to be a recap of the last 5 years, so it'll be a different sort of class than we've done, but you know, we'll see how it goes. And you know, you're welcome if you can make it. If you can't, we understand. So, you know,
what day is it next week?
Same time.
Wednesday.
At 7.
And feel free to spend whatever time you wish just looking at the back videos.
Mhm.
You know, because there's a whole library there that you might find interesting.
Yeah, I started to look and I got stuck on the Freemasons, and I need to go back to that one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh,
So anyway,
okay.
yeah, it's getting late. Sorry. I'm having
Okay,
too
well,
much
thank you for
fun.
coming, though.
Yes,
Thank
You're
you, thank
welcome.
you.
Great
Appreciate
meeting you
that.
guys.
And as
Okay,
Bye,
always,
have a
Bruce.
good
Okay.
good
night.
weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.